Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Medicine 3.0, your home for AI in healthcare, precision healthcare. This is a little bit of maybe a self-indulgent episode. And the reason I say that is I wanted to interview Christopher McGuire, my first co-founder for iScribes, which was my first company I started 10 years ago. At the time, he was 24, I was 38. We had no idea what we were doing, but I wanted to start telling the story of the beginning of this AI movement in healthcare. And it was a decade before now. And I think everybody thinks AI in healthcare is new. And we were working on it long ago. And I wanted to start telling that story. So this is the first of several episodes where I'm hoping to bring on people who helped build AI in healthcare. So I hope you enjoy. We go off on tangents. Christopher and I know each other extremely well. We're like brothers, but we had an amazing time. Hopefully you enjoy listening to it. Christopher, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is the most important thing I'll do today, probably.
Of course, any chance to talk to you is the most important thing I'll do in a day. So let's kick this off. Same question I ask everybody. How did you get where you're at knowing what you know?
My goodness, you're starting with the heavy stuff. I think it's probably a two-part answer. The first is like a soft answer, I'll say, but absolutely the truth. I think God's providence. Like I'm only, healthy and happy and a dad and a husband and have a career by the grace of God. And I think like when you get down to it, that stuff is, how's that tangible? I think it's because I grew up in a nuclear family with supportive parents who love me and believe in me. I was just given crazy opportunities, and the people in my sphere were willing to give me maybe more opportunity than I deserved, yourself included. But that started really young, like even with my parents or my first jobs where, maybe I was sweeping floors or pressure washing mold off a potato house wall. And someone would be like, hey, do you want to try, operating equipment? Or do you want to, as a scribe, hey, do you want to start a company? I think people seeing, maybe seeing more in me than I saw in myself, and being willing to give me an opportunity is probably, has a lot to do with where I am today. And I think my part in that, I think, is maybe how I'm wired. And I think it's maybe the curiosity and excitement of like a golden retriever and the confidence of an orthopedic surgeon, and just, not knowing any better. I think that's probably how I wound up here today. But a lot of it, not of my own doing by any stretch. People believing in me, giving me opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. Having watched you, a lot of blessings in your life, but also a lot of hard work on your side of things. And what I'm so excited to dig in on today is, it's been a decade since you and I started iScribes. I think it was, March of 2014 when we started iScribes. But I want to talk a little bit about like how we started that company, why we started that company. And it'll be interesting because lots of times I tell my story and my perspective, but I'm going to be really interested to hear your side of the story and your perspective. So why don't I'll give first little preamble. So Christopher was a scribe at the time. He was in college working with me in the ER. I remember his first shift. He was working with somebody was training him. And he kind of caught my eye because he kept asking questions. And I was like, this kid like wants to know medicine. And like, he's supposed to be paying attention, writing notes, but he keeps asking me like, how are you reading that x-ray? How do you know that's the right thing to do for this patient? And it was that curiosity that I was like, oh, this kid's different. And so we worked together for years, and then I think, as fate would have it, you left the emergency department working for cardiology, and I started stealing you away when I could to go down to Farmville and maybe start there, like, where you were what was going on in your life and kind of what happened from there.
Yeah, I actually got the scribe job. Going back to the last question, I got the scribe job because my histology professor kind of had the connection with the person who was the scribe manager, and I I think constantly bugged that guy and would ask him questions. He was a practicing podiatrist,
Mm.
and I was by no stretch, the most intelligent, the most driven, the most anything in his classes, aside from maybe the most annoying. And finally, he just said, what would be a great job for you where you would learn a lot of the stuff that you're asking me is like in this emergency department. And it just so happened like all the high performers got those jobs. And then there was me. And I think I was just curious. So I remember that very first shift working with you. And Shashi was training me. Shout out to Shashi. And I remember asking you about EKGs like on that first shift, not knowing that man, it's probably really annoying to try to do your job and also train someone how to do your job at the same time. I was in undergrad. I was trying to, build up a resume and take my MCATs and whatnot for medical school. And then I eventually went through that interview process. I loved doing the road trip work, like whether it was working at the Danville Cardiology Clinic or in the Farmville ER with you, because they paid mileage. And I was so broke that those mileage checks on top of my like $9 an hour scribe job were like, those things kept the ramen in the cupboard,
Yeah.
So it was interesting. It was a different patient population. It was fun. Dr. Sackett would buy me lunch in Danville, and you and I would like go to Taco Bell, or you'd send me down the street to cook out in your car when it was slow, and we'd get dinner. And it was selfishly like such a great learning opportunity for me and just a wonderful experience. I got to work in cardiology, which was crazy interesting to me. Watching those guys come into the major bays when we'd have a STEMI call and have them say something like, hey, you're having a heart attack. I'm going to take you down to the cath lab and fix it. It was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen someone say. Like, I need to learn more about that. So, curiosity, I think, is the thing that like got me there. And I tell people to this day, that scribe job is the best job I've ever had. Like, I was so broke and the hours were really brutal. The day shifts, the night shifts, and switching back and forth. But I don't think I've ever had such an exciting, time where you could learn so much, see so many different things, meet so many different people. It was really cool. And then, then you like had this crazy idea that, I got a phone call from you or a text message or something. And you said like, hey, can I buy you dinner? And my first thought was like, free food, let's go. And I think after that, I was like, he has some crazy harebrained idea. I think you told me about like the nickelcade and some other like entrepreneurial things you were thinking about. I was like, he's going to pitch me on some crazy idea. Yeah, sure enough, you did.
Yeah. I mean, I had three ideas at the time. The one was a nickel arcade. The second was liquid nitrogen ice cream. And the third was...
Yes.
The third was ambient virtual scribing that we would someday automate. So I think we picked the right one. So it's funny. So I call you, I text you, I'm like, hey, let's meet up. And what had just happened was I had pitched an accelerator in North Carolina, a business accelerator, on this idea of virtual ambient scribing. And so I get you there and I'm like, hey, you're interviewing for med school, right? And you're like, yeah, interviewing for med school. It's going pretty good. And I'm like, hey, forget med school. Like, who needs med school? And I remember after that conversation, because I'm like, hey, move down to North Carolina with me. We're going to start this company together. And I remember at the end, you're like, I think I better talk to my dad.
Yeah.
So what was that conversation like with your dad?
Not what you would expect whatsoever. And I think I had said something like, I'm like 80 or 90% in. I just need to talk to my dad first.
Yeah.
And my dad, like, just for background, I think this is important context. My dad, like, I grew up in northern Maine, one of the poorest counties east of the Mississippi, single income household. my dad worked at a municipal utility company. And I was the first of, the four kids to go to college and pursue a degree. I was very close to obtaining that. And of course, since I was like in 7th or 8th grade, I wanted to go to medical school. And so the prospect of calling my dad, who, didn't go to college, neither did my mom, and saying like, hey, this idea of medical school that has, I'm pretty close to and has been going really well. Like, I'm thinking about dropping that, was like, I don't think this phone call is going to go very well. And it didn't go how I expected at all. He said, you can go to school anytime. You're very likely to fail at this business and this idea, but the experience that you'll get is invaluable. Like, you'll carry that with you the rest of your life. You're not married, you don't have kids, you don't have, huge commitments in life. This is the time to try something like this if you want to. And so I didn't expect that answer from him at all. I'll go back to like really supportive parents who, are going to support you and love you no matter what. What a huge asset in life that is. Like, so with his support, I think I just called you right back like very soon afterward and was like, all right, like, let's do this. Thinking like a year later, I would just, I would go back to school and become a doctor, and we might mess up, but like, that's okay. We learned some stuff. So yeah, it didn't go like I expected at all. And, what a fortuitous phone call. How crazy is that?
Yeah. When I think back, like if you had said no, I would have dropped the whole thing because I knew I couldn't do it alone. Like I absolutely knew, like, I still had to support my family. I was taking money out of my retirement account, not telling my wife about it to start this business and not recommended. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
But like, if you had said, no, Jared, I'm out, I would have dropped it and just been working in the
crazy.
ER.
That's crazy. Because there were plenty of people around us, like soon after that who saw what you did and like came to us with ideas and things that they wanted to do. And, they never took the first step. They never stepped out and took the risk. They never like dropped some shifts, took the risk, spent some money. And I gotta say, that was my question to you. I feel like when we were at that maker space in Lynchburg, and I was like, you're successful, you're well credentialed, you got like your kids are healthy, everybody's planted in Lynchburg. Like, what are you doing? And I remember you said something like, this is a problem I have to solve. Like, I gotta do this. Like, and that was convincing enough for me to, quit my hopes and dreams, at least temporarily. But yeah, it's crazy to think back. It's been 10 years.
Yeah.
Wild.
I mean, I was 38 at the time, and you were what, 22, 23?
2014, 24.
24.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've both aged a little bit since then. But yes. I mean, you wouldn't know it looking at us, of course.
No. It's all the cryo magic and the supplements, I think, that keep us young, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so it was funny, when we started, and it's just like you said. So there were 4 doctors that were involved in ENT, 2 ER docs, and a cardiologist, and none of them did anything. And so after like a month, I kind of said, hey guys, I'm going to go do this with Christopher. And then we drive down to Durham, North Carolina. At the time, we had one other co-founder. We had Tyson, my old college roommate. And I remember, starting a business, we had all these crazy hopes and dreams. Our first night there, we were coming up with like, what's our infomercial going to be? We were talking about like, what's the iScribes jet going to look like? Like, you have all these hopes and dreams and aspirations, and we had no funding other than my retirement account. And there was so much that we thought we could do, but we had 0 product. We had 0 business.
No experience.
No experience. And it's crazy to be here 10 years later and look around and like the biggest ambient product out there, it started that night. It started that
which
day.
is wild. With merch that you made with iron-on patches. I still have the EYE Scribes sweatshirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, still in a tote in my closet.
Yeah.
I think our greatest asset was our ignorance. Honestly,
Yeah.
we were just blissfully unaware of the commitment, like the hard work, the heartache that would come along with it, like the risk. I think that was such an asset, that we just took things one day at a time and solved one problem at a time. Yeah, if we'd have known going in, I don't think we would have ever taken the risk. We'd have never done it.
No. It's insane to think about, so there are other ambient companies out there, and even some who say that they were the first to create ambient, or they're the only doctor-led ambient company. And like the story between like us, a college kid, an ED doc who still has $300,000 in student loans versus, the guy who's working at a VC firm at Carnegie Mellon and decides to like raise a bunch of money. These very different stories, and to see where it ended up is kind of crazy. But when you think about those early days, what are some of like the most important things that happened during that time that you think helped us and led to us finally figuring it out?
Two things stick out right away. One is the cold email to info@triangleortho.com.
Yeah.
Like we maybe, wound up being pretty good at sales, but at the time we were just, again, had no idea what we're doing. And who knew like a cold email would lead to, your first customer, your first outside investment money, and really great sounding boards that we could rely on like later on, in product feedback. And then of course the fortuitous meeting of David Meisner. I think, to think that we would be where we are today without David, zero chance. Like I think there were a couple of loose cannons, and then a guy that was like, very well versed in M&A and building out financial models and having discussions with investors, and really is like the buttoned up kind of keep you and I on track guy. Man, I think, David Meisner walking into Groundwork Labs, indispensable. Groundwork Labs, John Austin and crew. I don't think we'd be where we are today without, being at Groundwork Labs. That community, the whole American Underground, the startup community in Durham was a huge part of it. And we said at the time, we would tell people, they'd be like, well, where are you from? What are you doing? Well, you can't start a tech company in Lynchburg, Virginia. And we kind of said it flippantly, but man, that ecosystem really gave us like connections and access to capital and access to mind share, really.
Yeah.
So I would say, Groundwork Labs, huge factor. David Meisner, huge factor. And then of course the people at Triangle Ortho, Dr. Dimmick in particular, the whole executive team there, now Emerge Ortho, they played such a huge role that, they were all pivotal. And it's funny winding up here today with that whole level of success that we achieved, or that the product has achieved. It's not one thing. It's just the confluence of a million little things that went right or went wrong. Right. Kind of push us one direction. Like I think of the day you mentioned, like one other company on the scene at the time was Augmetics. Yeah. And I remember when we figured out like Google Glass wasn't going to work for us and we could just do audio only. What a fortuitous failure. Yeah. Like to just know that you can record audio, or like the decision to keep all the data. We thinking, like someday some smart people will be able to help turn this into, ambient versus this, service backend that we had at the time. There are just a million things, but I'll say it again. David Meisner and the info@triangleortho.com were huge for us in the early days.
Yeah. And I mean, both stories are crazy, right? So you email info@triangleortho.com, and the president of Triangle Ortho responds to you and is like, let's meet up and have lunch.
Yeah. And by the way, my son works at a VC firm. He'll be there too. Like,
right?
what?
Yeah. Insane. And I mean, Tom Deming, he was very visionary. He still is, obviously. He's retired now, but what a great guy. He was, I think he was a mentor to us. He helped get us funding. He helped get us sales. You probably remember when he flew us down to South Carolina on the chartered jet to like go make a sale with us.
Yeah, after I had made that 3.5 or 4 hour drive a million times before and a million times after, but the taste of general aviation and a 30-minute flight with that was incredible.
Yeah, what a great guy. And then David Meisner, I mean, you and I both know, like you said, we would have failed if David hadn't shown up on the scene.
No question.
And it's crazy when you ask David, like, why did you choose to do this? And he's like, I'd been really successful at JP Morgan. My fiance was in healthcare. I heard all her friends complained about it. And then I found you guys and you seem to be solving the most interesting problem. And I'm sure David looked at us and was like, who are these jokers? But the fact that he threw in his hat with us and, day after day just did amazing work. That was huge.
I think it took a combination of all of us though, really. And, Tyson at the time thinking through product, but like David's there aren't a lot of humans on earth that have David's intellect and like his IQ horsepower and the drive that he has. And it's just such a rare combination, but I think it took that and just our own ignorance of the work it would take. But like we were experts in the domain and we kind of knew it, but we didn't know to what extent it would be so valuable. I think, we knew exactly, you knew how to solve the problem for the physicians. I knew how to solve the problem for the scribes, and David really knew how to make it a business and to attract investor money and to help us go get customers. And we couldn't have drawn it up not that we drew it up, but we couldn't have drawn it up any better. I'm so thankful for all those fortuitous moments.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories from those early days, right? We start in Groundwork Labs, which is in the basement of the American Underground in Durham, and we thought it was awesome. We were like, this is amazing. And we stayed there as long as they would absolutely let us stay, and then they kicked us out finally. They're like, you can't stay here any longer. And then we join this healthcare accelerator where we're the only, like, this house that got rented to become a healthcare accelerator, and we're the only ones there. I guess there's one other small business. There's no heat in the house. And
the heat we're Bitcoin miners. It was like
Yeah. The guy had Bitcoin miners running all the time. We had a heater in the bathroom because you'd have to go turn on the heat if you needed to sit down on the toilet. And you were scribing like crazy. You're sitting in the corner with like mittens on and scribing because we have a product and we're selling and we're trying to build this thing.
Yeah, it was wild. We had some crazy office spaces. Like anything that was cheap or free, we were all over.
Oh my goodness.
The Groundwork Labs was incredible because they would, lots of free pizza, lots of other startups, great community. That office near the Duke campus, no heat, but man, it had character. And like we went places there. The American Underground office we had for like a little while with the rooftop deck was super cool. And then the walk-up space in downtown Durham. Where we had like 10 people and 5,000 square feet, but it was the cheapest thing around. Like, it was, my goodness, man, it's crazy. But I have to kind of pause here, like go on an office space side tour. One of the craziest, like we joke about, you and I have joked for a long time about who's the better salesman, but I think the award that gets, you the trophy is getting that, the 5th floor office at One City Center in Durham. I think that's a story worth sharing if you want to like delve into how we got there and how they said yes.
Well, that was after the acquisition, right?
Yes, very soon after, right? Like
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah, that was after we were acquired by Nuance, and I'm trying to remember the story, Christopher. Like I don't even
So
remember.
I don't know how grounded in truth this is, but I'll give you my recollection.
Okay.
We had do you remember there was a gal who like kept sending us like ads for different office spaces? Like there was a real estate agent we had
Yep.
worked with, and we
Yep.
looked down by like King's Sandwich Shop. There was a
Yep.
space down there. I think we looked in Research Triangle Park. We looked in Raleigh, and then I think so the backstory is we had this walk-up space that literally looked at a hole in the ground for a few years, and then suddenly the hole in the ground was like a 20-story building, and WeWork had the first like 4 or 5 floors of that, and we knew it was so far out of our budget right after this acquisition that we were curious, I think. So I see a theme here. We went to look at the office, and it was basically 3/4 of like the 5th floor or something, and it had its own deck. It had like a coffee bar, a bunch of its own office spaces. It was like enough office space for a solid 100 people. And we looked at it and basically walked outside and then found out how much it was going to be a month. And I think it was insane. It was like unfathomable money. And I think your words were like, I'll just send them, an email and say we found an office space and a link to it and see what they say. And we had like Dave who had helped us through the acquisition and some other people, and they were like great folks, but not necessarily the fastest communicators. And so I remember we were walking back to our regular office, and you had sent this email like, "Hey, I found a space. Here it is." And almost immediately, like, we got a yes. We're like, "Wait, what? Do they realize what this costs? Like, how this is like, going from the slums to the moon." So it was. And then I immediately moved and never really got to enjoy that office space. But
That's true. That's true.
It's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy.
Yeah. You were up in Jersey. I feel like we touched on like the first 6 months of building iScribes. I think we made some important decisions. One is we only did orthopedics.
Yes.
We wouldn't do any other specialty. We had people begging us all the time, "Why don't you do ENT or urology or something?" And we always said no, like we're only going to do orthopedics. And then 2 is like we grew and we started hiring scribes. And when we were in that unheated house, we invited Chelsea Murdich to come visit us. And somehow she caught the vision too. Somehow we're like, "Hey, move down from Lynchburg, Virginia, move down here with us and build this company." And she actually did it. And another crazy addition.
And we had some really incredible people like join early. Like Austin jumped on with us early. Was a big helped a lot with scribe training early on. Chelsea, like Justin wasn't, on too much further after that. I think like Rachel was on early. Like, man, what a crew of people, and what a testament to just like amazing culture. Like, the team that we grew, or that, grew around us, was really, really incredible.
Yeah. I think the other thing that we did really well was we really cared about culture. And it's been interesting to watch because we built such a tight-knit remote community. When we sold, we had, 250 employees, and everybody loved the mission so much. And we spent all the time, doing weekly updates, celebrating with each other. And we sent a t-shirt to everybody after 2 weeks of joining iScribes. They got a hoodie after a year. Like, everybody loved the mission so much that, when I tell people what we paid to work at iScribes, like, I almost feel guilty. We couldn't afford any more. Like, we couldn't pay more than that.
You act like it was a choice.
Right. Right. But I feel guilty.
Yeah.
Like they started at minimum wage, and then like when they were, ramped up, we'd bump them up to like $10 an hour. And it's crazy to think how loyal everybody was. And people would leave and they'd be getting paid twice as much and they'd feel bad. They'd be like crying while they're telling us that they were leaving because they loved the mission so much. Which I think that was another part of building a successful company that built the product that is Dragon Ambient Experience today.
Yeah, that was my only doubt about you in the beginning. Like, what is this culture stuff? Like, dude, we need customers and money in the bank. Like, let's stop talking culture. And man, oh man, if I talk to someone about, no matter what their organization is, if they're building a business, like they're, doing, I don't know, whatever they're doing, leading a volunteer organization, whatever it is, that's the first thing I go to now. And it's because you wind up with, the right people on the bus and you can accomplish anything. You can go through scribe apocalypse, we call it. And, you can be up till 3-4 in the morning with just an unending work stream and, a bunch of Chinese takeout and be okay with it. I think the culture work that we did, I shouldn't say I participated early on, you led, was critical. And I think it still is. Like, there's a core group of people who were with us at the very beginning who are still working on the product, working in various capacities, around the mission and vision that you sold early on. I think that's a testament to, what led you down that path of like, we need to work on culture. Like what got you interested in thinking through that?
Because I had never built a business, I kind of just voraciously read books. And this because I was driving all the time to come down, and I would always be listening to a new business book. And I kept hearing about culture, and I was like, I don't really understand what culture is. Like, is it having dogs at work? Is it, doing yoga at work? Like, what is culture? But it finally clicked. Like, it's community, it's hiring for the right type of person. And then it just kind of self-perpetuates, where people feel ownership and they feel community. And then I just realized, like, this is the only way we're going to be successful, because it's really expensive to train people. And if they leave, then that's a huge deal. And so what if we make it so everybody who joins loves it so much they never want to leave? And that was kind of it. And, it wouldn't have worked if we didn't have the right core team, like you, David, Justin Edelman, Chelsea Murdich, Amy Edelman, Donna, like that core team, Chris K, like yes. James Jeffries, like that core team, like was so tight and so mission driven. Like everybody put in those extra hours. Like you talked about Scribepocalypse, which was when we had hired a bunch of college kids to do work for us, and they all left to go back to school in August. And we had just brought on Ortho Carolina, which was our biggest new contract. And we had tons of work. And so everybody, myself, David Meisner, everybody who could possibly type was scribing notes and like that kind of do whatever it takes. And, we had our core values and we talked about them all the time. We only had 3, which is super helpful because when you have 10, you can't talk about them all the time.
Yeah, they're not very core at that point.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think when you think back to like those years? Was there ever a time where you were scared, where you were like, this isn't going to work, like this is going to fail?
I mean, a bunch. Yeah. But there were a bunch of times where I knew we couldn't fail either. Scribepocalypse was one where it was like a little bit of both, where we were asking customers to stop using the product so we could catch up and deliver on our turnaround times. And they refused to stop using the product. Like, looking back, that's like the greatest compliment we're ever going to get on, hey, you're headed in the right direction. I think there were some scary times where, hey, we're not gonna, this is X amount of time for runway and payroll, and without closing on this round of investment, without like me dumping, me as in you, like dumping in some extra money, we're not going to hit payroll. Like so and so is going to get paid, half of their take home this week because that's just the way it is. Those were scary times, and I think toward the end of the acquisition, like your goal when you get acquired is to hit your closing date with $0 in the bank, and we were like dead set on making that goal, right or wrong. Not necessarily on purpose, just because we were running out of funds and the close date kept getting pushed back from things we couldn't control. That got a little scary, but we had something that was successful. Like if we could go out and push product and have it be, we talked about like an MVP, a minimum viable product, and it was like this hokey Kickstarter watch on a smartphone app with literally one button. But we delivered quality, and we delivered, more face-to-face time for doctors with their patients. And man, it's crazy. Like if I was the sales force, like that ought to tell you something, like that you have a very good product. If you have a sales guy with no experience, like closing more sales than we could possibly, operationalize. Like those were the times when it was like, yeah, we're going to be successful. There's no doubt in my mind. But there were plenty of those nights where you went to sleep and you were like, man, maybe I should apply for a real job or something here soon, because things are looking shady. How about you?
I mean, we did have something special. Like, I don't know if you remember Scott Barstow meeting with us and saying,
absolutely,
like he had gone and talked with Triangle Ortho, and he came back and he's just like, you guys, if people would give bags of gold for what you have product market fit. Like people absolutely love what you're building. And I remember just being like, oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah. But like the scary moments, I think I shared this story with you. So Michael Ann, my wife, and I, we had never done a big trip, and we had paid for and had plane tickets and all the tickets to go to Machu Picchu in Peru and go on a backpacking trip with my friends. And like 2 days before, I told her, I was like, iScribes is going to go bankrupt while we're gone. And she's like, well, you can't leave. And I'm like, there's nothing to do. Like iScribes is going to go bankrupt. And she's like, you can't leave. Like you moved me down to Durham, North Carolina. You took me away from all my friends. You better stay here and fix this. And so the next day I took out $300,000 in personal loans and floated the company, and we made it. So that was scary.
Yes.
We were 2 days away from bankruptcy, and the idea, that I would just tell her all the time, like if iScribes fails, I'm going to work till I'm 80. Like there's, I've leveraged everything we have, and I really hope this doesn't fail.
You left your house with a basketball court, which was like, kid from Aroostook County, Maine, seeing what you came from, and like you put it all on the line to make this business a go. Like, that was crazy to me that you would do that. But thanks for doing that. Thank you, Michael.
Well, but when you think about it, like all the way across the board, like everybody who was involved, you not going to med school, David Meisner, I think he got paid like $30,000 a year at iScribes. He was probably making 200 grand at JP Morgan. I don't know, but he was making a lot more money, and he was making like nothing. And everybody, all the scribes, like all of, Justin, Chelsea, Amy, like nobody made
put it on the line
any money for years because they believed in the vision and they were willing to do this. And it's crazy that I think it's the craziest thing, because we sacrificed so much, and, up until 2 years ago, we were the only company that had enough data to have a real ambient product. And
Yeah.
then in the blink of an eye, like,
Yeah, our competitive moat went away
yeah,
with the advent of like large language models. How crazy is that? We thought, no one can catch us for years
yeah,
because we have high quality recordings, we have high quality notes. That's what it takes to train a model. I think for a while, even the folks at Nuance, like we were a bargain for them. Like we're certainly the best acquisition they've ever made. I'll say it like far and
yeah,
away.
yeah,
Um, like
yeah,
this is the anchor product now. Like there's no two ways about it, and it is for Microsoft. But I think it led, a lot of it led to the Microsoft acquisition. Um,
yeah.
no data to back that up. Christopher's opinion land, but I think
Yeah,
Dax is mentioned on earnings calls for trillion-dollar companies. You know that's pretty strong evidence right there. But yeah, our competitive moat was our data trove, and
yep,
yeah, it's meaningless. And it's not meaningless. You can still tune
yeah,
models and keep them from hallucinating. But yeah, it's pretty wild. We thought this would happen.
yeah,
You know that this was the idea. I feel like back in the Google Glass days, we were like, well, we're not smart enough to make build AI to write these nodes, but somebody is, and we'll get there someday. But
yeah,
yeah, having open AI come out of nowhere, now AI is everywhere. It's ubiquitous, and
yep,
yeah, I never saw that coming. Not in a million
yeah,
years.
yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy, but such a cool journey, such a cool, opportunity to learn and grow. And so I don't know, like, looking back on all of it, you talked about like how you got where you're at and like all the blessings. What would you say like are some of the biggest learnings that you still put into action in your life today from that decade long journey?
I think. Oh man, this could be like a 2-hour episode. I think alone. The first I'm going to say is like take action, have a bias toward action,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we talked about a lot of people. I'm sure after we sold the business, like the phone rang a lot with people with ideas like, oh, I want to start this, I want to start that, and we saw a lot of that around the startup accelerators. But the people who we met, and I think a lot of our success was having a bias toward action. Like we didn't talk about or think about doing something for a long time. We put it into practice and put it to the test, and it either yielded results or it didn't. And I think that's, there are people who dream of starting businesses for decades or dream of doing something for however long. And, you're the guy that sold the house with the basketball court in the backyard to like go do it, and took out personal loans to go do it. And I think that would lead me to the second one is if you don't have that level of conviction to put your career on the line, to put your marriage on the line, potentially to put your kids' education on the line, if you're not that convicted to solve a big problem, like you probably don't have any business starting a company around it, at least not a high growth startup, maybe a lifestyle business, something like that. But that's the level of commitment it takes, and that's what I learned. Like that's a huge commitment. And then how you treat people is more important than anything. I think that's a lot of why the idea was successful. It's because it gave physicians their dream back of just practicing medicine instead of being administrators or note takers. It gave patients the ability to look their physician in the eye and not have the physician have their back turned. Ours, we gave the employees a sense of community and a great place to work. Despite really terrible pay and tough hours and tight deadlines, people got treated right. And whether it was remote people or those of us in the office, running down to King's Sandwich Shop for burgers on your dime. How you treat people is just so incredibly important. But I would say just taking measured risks is another one. I would say is be wrong by trying. Don't be wrong by hypothesizing and not going for it. So I think those are the big ones, but I could probably talk about lessons learned for days. And I got to say, it's one of those things that I'm thankful I had the experience of going through all the things that we went through, good and bad, early
Yep.
in my life. Like what a blessing. I'm 34 now. I get to carry those things forward. And, I apply those lessons to like my, to parenting, to my marriage, to the way I do my day-to-day job now. It really had a big impact on me. And I think a lot of that was you. You looked out for me and I mean this, not trying to butter your biscuits or anything, but like you treated me like a younger brother. You're like, hey, if you want to learn about medicine, I'll teach you about medicine. If you want to learn about being a doctor, I'll teach you that. And you paid me out of your own pocket for a bunch of the first part of the year. You lent me your little Toyota truck. A couple times you helped buy me groceries. Like when things were real tight for me, I think it goes back to the way you treat people. Like you build loyalty, you build trust, you build confidence. So yeah, there are a lot of lessons learned. Probably rambling now, but a lot to think about there. Big formative period in my life.
Yeah, for me too, honestly. And having somebody like you by my side was amazing. One of the reasons I chose to do it with you was because of your willingness to try anything. Like I said, hey, let's write a patent. And you're like, okay. And you weren't fast at it, but you wrote a patent.
It worked. It did work. Yeah.
Just your willingness to try anything and to do anything and have that curiosity and bias for action. And yeah, I mean, you're one of the great friendships of my life, and the opportunity to build a business with you was amazing. And this has been so much fun to kind of reminisce and catch up on it. So if people like this, maybe we'll do a part 2. But if everybody's like, I don't want to listen to those two ramble, then maybe we won't. But this was personally, I loved this. So thanks so much,
I really enjoyed this. Thank you, Jared. I looked forward to doing this from the minute you brought it up. And once you sent me that message, I realized it had been 10 years, and it's wild. Time flies. But yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to chat about this and reminisce. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Take care, Christopher.
All right. See you, Jared. Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Medicine 3.0. We make this podcast so that you know where to turn for good information on keeping you and your loved ones healthy. Feel free to check us out at bionichealth.com, where we can help you live a longer, happier life.